All right, let's try that again. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, let's
What are
see.
you trying again?
Oh, I had a setting wrong with my. I'm using my earbuds. So, anyways, well, great to see you all. Brian, thank you for joining us tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Cari, good to see you. Light crowd. Here we are, but Ann and Gus Haugen are here with us, and Carol Swanson and Rick and Sandra Rothhausen. Good to have you all. And I suspect there might be others who join us as we go along. Susan Hurlbut's tuning in here. So we'll give maybe just a couple of moments. But we had a great conversation this morning with Becky Burkus, the principal of Central Park Elementary. And she did just a great job of giving us a window into the school that is closest to Prince of Peace, and all of the students and the staff that are a part of that. And it's been an important relationship for us as a church to be able to live out our faith, to work closely and help fill some gaps and help provide some needs and some resources. And Becky shared with us this morning a really powerful story of how the sort of genesis of her relationship and reaching out to Every Meal to think about, and at the time known as Sheridan Story, thinking about how to take care of some of the students and the families that they have. Brian, I don't know if you know that story. I believe it's in one of the videos of Sheridan Stories. It's somewhere in the archives there, but great story of her needing to take a student home. The student ended up back at school he was having a tough day, is the way she put it, and ultimately the only way to get him home at the end of the day was for her to drive him home. And so she was feeling a little bit put out and feeling kind of frustrated by that circumstance. And then this young man is riding in the back of her car and finds a granola bar back there in her back seat, and sort of presumptuously says, "Can I have this?" And she sort of begrudgingly, I think is the way she put it, says, "Sure, okay, fine," and she gets the child home, and she brings the child inside to where he lives, and she gets a window. She gets to look into the home where this young man lives, and of course there's a whole bunch of other siblings that come. He calls for them in their native language, and these kids come and gather around, and he then pulls out that granola bar and splits it up and shares it with his siblings or the other children that are in that home. And that powerful story, and it sort of Becky puts recognized in her own sort of recognized that her story in her own story, she realized how much she didn't understand about the students that she was serving and their needs, and the reality for those lives that they have. And so as a result of that began a partnership with Every Meal, and again at the time known as Sheridan Story, and so we're blessed to have Brian Jones with us this evening, representing Every Meal. And I want to give you the floor here and have you share with us everything we need to know and understand about your organization, and recognizing that we have a relationship and a history, and we're hoping to inspire some more people to get involved, and to help support us and help us tell the story. This session is being recorded, and we'll be sharing this more broadly with our community so that others get a chance to hear everything. So even though perhaps our attendance is a little light here, we'll make sure that this gets shared as well. So I've done enough talking. I'll moderate and keep an eye on the clock and things like that as we move forward. You'll also know that Cari Gelle is with us today, and she's going to be sharing some information with us later on about the upcoming election within the Roseville School District to support the district with a levy, and so there's questions for the voters of the Roseville School District that hopefully we'll be able to offer some insight into today. So Brian, take it away.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. How are you?
Good.
So first of all, I would love everyone to have a pencil and a piece of paper. I thought we'd try something. So if you don't have a pencil and piece of paper, that's okay, but we'll give you a chance to get that. I think we're going to go old school, even though we're on Zoom. I kind of like the old school better. So first of all, thank you so much. Your church has been faithful and generous. And I just can't thank you enough, particularly in this time when food insecurity has been such a challenge. So thank you. So what I want to do is I want to share a little bit about our organization's history. I'll try to keep it interesting. And then I want us to do that activity where you'll need your pencil. And then I'll leave some questions for Q&A. I don't like to talk long because I would rather answer the questions you have rather than me talk at you. But I will give you a little bit of history. Peter mentioned it. We started out in Sheridan Elementary School, and the principal there noticed that kids were hoarding food on Friday afternoons because when they didn't have free or reduced lunch during the day on weekends, that created a food gap, and they were hungry, and so they would hoard foods. They would put extra food into their pockets and into their backpacks so that they would have something to eat. Mill City Church met at that school at Sheridan Elementary, and they were like, what's the church for if it's not to help hungry kids, right? Like, why do we exist if that's not what we're trying to do? And so meeting in that school, they started this. They're like, well, kids are hungry. Let's give them some food. Let's not make it complicated, right? And a guy who had a logistics background, and his dad used to work for Billy Graham, took over the program and thought, gosh, hunger is not a supply problem, it's a distribution problem. So let's think about the logistics of this. And it just worked great at that one school. And Rob, the executive director, met with the pastor and said, gosh, thanks, this worked. What if we would tell other churches about it and invite other schools about it? What would be the hurdles? Again, thinking about someone with the background in logistics, what would be the hurdles? What would be the bottlenecks? What would be the barriers? And so they started to think through, well, churches aren't good at logistics. That's not their background. They're not good at food purchasing. That's not their background. We haven't met a church yet that likes to do permission slips and sign up forms and those sort of things. And so started to go through those barriers and said, gosh, what if we would do that? Like our heart, what if we would support all that back end logistics so that churches could just serve? And so that's how it started. And in 2019, we were in about 350 schools. And I would describe us as a solid Ford F-150, just good and dependable, getting food to kids, 350 schools. We had really worked on our logistics. Things were working well. And when you get to 350, you have the benefits of scale, right? And so we were able to leverage all that logistical scale in order to make bulk food purchases, right? And keep costs down. And at the end of 2019, we became a direct importer, which was divine providence, frankly. And so at the end of 2019, we became a direct importer, which meant we don't buy wholesale, we buy direct and we import. And so we're like, well, let's just cut out the middle cost. It'll keep costs down. Well, in 2020, COVID hit, and then the civic unrest, and then And so I shared to folks that we became a dump truck. And so we're like, we just got to empty the warehouses and get the food out. And so it became a different logistical challenge. So even as we were in 350 schools in 2019, another 200 schools reached out to us. And so we're like, normally we would wait on a sponsor, right? We'd find a sponsor, because that's how we keep it small. Even though we have the benefits of all the scale, the way we keep it small is it's, hey, this church partners with this school that's in their backyard, right? And that's how the relationship stays small. And since 2020, we didn't have volunteering. We're like, let's get those schools going. Just get the food delivering. We'd either do pallet drops with the district, or the school administrators would put the bags of food in the backpacks, right? And so now we're hustling to backtrack to try to find sponsors for all those new schools in the midst of, frankly, is an unbelievable amount of staffing turnover in schools. And so the challenge of the solution became, all right, how do we do distribution when schools are really under a tremendous amount of pressure? But in terms of every meal, what happened is when you had to increase production 400% in 2020, which we did, you have to make some infrastructure upgrades, because you just can't do it. One example is we now have fancy tape machines, right? And so before we'd have the tape roll and we'd tape the boxes and volunteers would tape it. And you've used those tape machines, and volunteers had tape in their elbows and tape in their hair, and they'd get clogged. And, you know, if you're trying to do 400% capacity, you can't operate that way. Now we have tape machines, and you run the box through and it's just like, zoom, and it tapes it. And we've been able to carry those infrastructure upgrades with us into 2021. And so now I say, in terms of organization, we're a Ferrari. And so operationally, we're really humming and working. The challenge is, as much as we'd like to think some of the things are behind us, what we've learned, I think what many of us learned, not just our organization, but just in our culture, we learned how many people are living paycheck to paycheck. I think that's the reality that we've discovered as an organization. And that's the reality, I think, a lot of folks in our culture is there's a lot of folks just living right on the edge. And so that's what our game's going to be about, our activity. But before that, I wanted to tell you a little bit about presently what we're doing that's new for us. So like I said, we went up to, we added a number of schools. We went up to 400% capacity. We settled into about 200% capacity. So we're double where we were in 2019 after that surge of the civic unrest, which was pretty difficult for a lot of folks. We've added some fresh produce. We've been partnering with, we have our own gardens. We've been partnering with community gardens. And in our summer program, we subsidize, we add to our bags of shelf stable food with some fresh produce. So that's something new. And just recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, we were in the news. We were on the nightly news during COVID times. Again, schools are in person now, which is great for learning, absolutely. But there are some classrooms that are being quarantined. And I don't know if you've read that in the news. It'll often be like a whole classroom. They'll have an outbreak and they'll need to quarantine those, 25 students or so. Well, what happens to those students when they don't have access to free or reduced lunch anymore because they're quarantined at home? And so now what we're doing is we're working with district superintendents, and they tell us when those students are being quarantined, and we're sending food to them so that it can get to their home. And so that's been something new that we're doing that we're really proud of and thankful that we're able to do. And then thankfully, when those kids come back, they have access to that free reduced lunch anymore. And then our program goes back to the weekly Friday rhythm. So that's where we are. Kind of a quick summary of where we came from and where we went and sort of what's new with us. And so now I'd love for you to pull out your pencil and let's have a little bit of back and forth activity. So one thing that we get asked a lot is some questions about food insecurity. And so there's some misperceptions, some misunderstandings about what food security is. And a lot of folks wondering about food insecurity and that sort of thing. And so in the next couple of months, and Peter, we'll send some of these to your church maybe when we finally get it, but we're coming out with a training kit. We're calling it Every Meal in a Box, so that families can take it home. And in particular, there's a lot of families that will come to our packing events, and they'll want to like teach their kids a little more about the issue of food insecurity. And so I'm just going to pull one of these activities that's in this box that's coming. And I thought we would just do it over Zoom and we'd try it. And so essentially what I want each of you to do is just imagine that you're living paycheck to paycheck. Because I think that's what we realize that a lot of Americans are, is living paycheck to paycheck. Because there's 300,000 kids in Minnesota that are suffering from food insecurity. And so when you say a number like 300,000, it just feels made up. You know, people can't really wrap their mind that there would be that many kids in our state, in America, that's living in food insecurity. So we're going to do an activity that talks about food insecurity. So I'm going to ask you to pretend you're people, and we're going to go through some scenarios, and then we're going to see where we are. Okay. Does that sound good?
Okay.
All right. So we need 3 guys to step up. All right. So 3 guys. Rick, are you willing? All right, Rick, I want you to pretend that you are a 28-year-old male. Okay. So write this down. So write down these identifiers so that you can remember yourself. You can give yourself any name you want. Brian, it's a great name if you want to choose that. But you're 28. You are unemployed. You formerly worked as a cashier, hourly, okay? But now you're unemployed. You worked hourly as a cashier. You don't have any children, so write down 0 children. And you're currently managing multiple mental health diagnoses. So mental health issues, you're trying to get a handle on it, but late 20s male, it's not uncommon to have some mental health struggles that they're working through. You're currently couch hopping. You're staying with buddies. They're not always the best influence, but they're giving you a place to stay. You do not own a car. So write down no car, and you do not have a savings account. Okay. So that's your persona, Rick. All right, Peter, you want to play? All right. So Peter, you are a 54-year-old police officer. You have no children. You like to hunt and fish on the weekends. You just had a heart attack. It was mild, but you're dealing with the after effects of that. You own your own home, single family home. Your car is a sedan. And you do have a savings account.
Did you say I was married?
You are, I didn't say.
Oh, you didn't say.
Yeah, we'll just dealer's choice on that. Yeah.
Single.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. It says Ann on your
Oh,
Zoom.
and that's Gus.
Gus.
Yeah.
All right, Gus, are you ready?
Ready.
You are 42 years old. You work construction, which is hourly. So you get an hourly wage with your construction job. Gus has 1 child. And you're a recent immigrant from Eastern Europe. And so your English isn't great. You're learning it, but it's not great yet. You do not own a car, so no car. You live in an apartment and no savings account. All right, Carol, you ready?
Yep.
You are 23 years old. You are a waitress, and so you're dependent upon tips. You have 2 kids. You were in a car accident last year and you got a brain injury. And so you're working your way You're working your way back from that. You're okay, but you got to work your way back from that. You were able to get the car repaired, so you do have a car. Part of your therapy for your injury is gardening. So you've started gardening in your backyard. You rent a house with your sister, so you have family support, and you're renting a house together, and you do have a savings account. All right, Cari, you ready? You are a 51-year-old registered nurse. You have 3 kids. You enjoy gardening, so you have a garden in your backyard. You own a single family home. Would suspect there's a mortgage, but you have your home.
Okay.
You have an SUV for a car,
Mhm.
and you do have a savings account. All right, Susan, you are a 71-year-old female, retired. Your children are adults, so you have no adult children. You only have adult children. You don't have any children living with you. Current diagnosis of breast cancer. Does not have a car. Has a small garden in your backyard. You live in a small townhome, and you do have a savings account. Okay. And so this is just kind of a representative swath of what we would find around the Twin Cities, right? So different ages, ethnicities, backgrounds. And so what I want each of you to do is you're going to start with 0. And so what 0 means is you are kind of paycheck to paycheck, right? You don't have a ton of buffer each month. And so what I want you to do is you wrote down your attributes. And so I'm going to read some descriptions, and you will either give yourself +1 or -1. Okay. Starting at 0, and you'll either give +1 or -1. You ready? If your job gives you a fixed salary, give yourself +1.
Ryan, could you just repeat that? My internet cut out right when you said what you're gonna do is.
Oh, so listen to this and either give yourself a point or subtract a point. So you're
Okay.
starting at 0. So give yourself a
Okay.
point or subtract a point. So for example, if your job has a fixed salary, like if you're salaried, give yourself a point.
I don't remember if you said anything. Oh, I'm a nurse. That's right. I remember
Yeah,
my
so
job.
you'd
Thank
have
you.
a fixed salary.
Yep,
So give
got
yourself a point. So you can count on that.
Yep.
Now, if you worked hourly or tips, subtract a point. Hourly or tips, subtract a point. It's not quite as reliable, right? So hourly or tips, subtract a point. If you're unemployed, subtract a point.
Does
And so
retired count for unemployed?
retired counts for fixed, right? Mostly. I think so. For purposes of this, let's say a salaried.
Okay,
So maybe Social Security. It's limited, but it's dependable, right?
okay.
And so for 1 point, what we're pretending, I want to explain this as well, is 1 point is 1 bag of groceries. So we'll come back to that. It's 1 bag of groceries, okay? So if you are a gardener, farmer, or you like to hunt or fish, give yourself a point. So if you had a garden in your backyard or you like to hunt, give yourself a point. If you have a savings account, give yourself a point. If English is your second language, subtract a point. If you have a disease or any type of disability or recovering from some health issue, subtract a point. If you own a car or lease, add a point. If you have stable access to a kitchen, so you own a home, you're renting a home, if you have access to a kitchen, give yourself a point. If your persona is female, subtract a point. All right. So Rick, how did you do?
Minus 2 bags of groceries.
So you were plus minus 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you had the young male, right? He had mental health diagnosis. He was couch hopping and he ended up minus 2, right? So kind of on the edge. So he's food insecure, right? Which means probably he's might not know.
I'm a
where all those
dumpster
money
diver.
come from. Yeah. Maybe at the end of the month, or if he's got friends he can rely on, but he's food insecure. So Peter, where were you?
I had 5 plus ones and 1 minus 1.
Okay.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
my
So you were the
1
police
minus
officer?
was health related,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. Yeah. Which is very important, which shows you just a health scare and how that puts you closer to just being a little, if you're living on the edge, kind of paycheck to paycheck, it puts you, but you had some things going for you. You had a savings account. So you had a little bit of a backup. You had a car so you could get to work, a little better. You own a home and you're a hunter, right? So,
hunter and a good union job working for
and a good
for
union
the police
salary
union.
job. Yep.
That's right.
Yeah. So Gus, how did you do?
That is minus 1.
Minus 1.
I
And so
had
as a
2
reminder,
minuses
everyone-
and 1 plus, so the net is minus 1.
Minus 1. So as a reminder, everyone, you're the construction worker. English was your second language, but you did have a kid, right? And so minus 1, your household is food insecure. And so an hourly wage. So he's probably out hustling, trying to work work as many hours, get as many hours in as he can, right? So that he can get that extra bag of groceries, particularly around the end of the month. All right.
Cut out, so I didn't get all of
Yeah. So Carol, I think you were next, right?
Yeah, well, how many questions were there? 7?
Yeah, about that.
Because I was just writing minus plus.
6.
6 questions. Okay, so I think I had 4 and minus 2, so it came out 2, I think.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah, and as a reminder to folks, like you had a car crash, right? But you were able to get the car fixed.
Yeah,
But you had an injury, which is a subtraction.
yeah,
But you were able to rent with your sister. So you
Right.
had access to a kitchen, you
That
had
was
some family support, and you had a little bit of a savings account.
right.
So again, these are the predicators, the predictors for food insecurity. All right. And you can see how things that are just common among us, and particularly if you're living from paycheck to paycheck, how you can easily slip into what's considered food insecure.
So kids, you didn't have a question on kids, did you?
Yeah, I might have missed one.
I would think
Yeah.
kids would be,
It's a minus.
that would be a minus because you got
They're expensive to feed. Yeah.
That's where I thought maybe I missed something. I was thinking, is there 7? 7 questions or 6? Did I miss something there? Anyway, okay, go
So
ahead.
Cari, how did you do?
I did okay. Without any consideration of kids, I was +4 in
Okay.
the end.
Okay.
So I had a lot of resources and things available to give me
A car,
advantage.
home.
A car, a
garden.
home,
Yeah.
a
And it's
garden.
a little
I
bit of
was
a
the
savings account.
nurse.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If everyone
Yep.
in America had $1,000 in savings, that's one of the bigger thing. If something goes wrong, if the water heater goes out, it's not a disaster, right? You can get it fixed. Okay, who was last? I think Susan, that was you, right?
I think I'm +2.
+2. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. So you have a health scare, but you do have a garden, you have a townhome, and a little bit of a savings account, right?
Great.
Yeah. Now, the reason we share these is a lot of people expect us to, like, these bad news, downtrodden, out, down and out stories. And a lot of the stories, I mean, you can imagine these characters, right? Or like folks that you would know, right? Like these aren't, these wild, crazy stories. These are just folks who have health scares maybe, or they're in a car accident, or, like their job's reliant on tips and the tips dry up. These are normal everyday sort of things. And again, we didn't get into the crunchy stuff about the number of kids and some of the things that are even more difficult in terms of food insecurity. So I wanted to share that just to give you a picture on when we say 300,000 kids in Minnesota living in food insecurity. They come from homes like this, right? That are kind of paycheck to paycheck and kind of situations. And it's often for us to hear from a family will sign up and they'll be on our program for like 11 weeks. And then we'll get a note, the social worker will get a note. Hey, my husband got a job. We're doing much better now. You save this for someone who needs it. Right. And so, I mean, that's just tremendously heartwarming for them, but it shows you, okay, they're on their feet now and they're better, because it's not just a bag of food. It's obviously is about the bag of food, but it's also the stress, right? And so you can imagine all these situations and the stress that's involved. And so what we like to do is that weekly, regular, dependable Friday, so that there's a little bit more in a cupboard, right? There's that bag of food, particularly some, maybe they get to the end of the month and things are a little tighter, or their water heater breaks and they don't have a savings account. And it's like, oh my gosh, we got to get this fixed, or I guess we go with cold water until we can figure it out, right? Or we buy Cheetos because Cheetos are cheaper than, the healthy meal, right? And so a lot of people say, well, do we have kids starving? No, oftentimes food insecurity in the United States does not look like starvation. It looks like obesity, right? Because if you're trying to stretch a dollar, you're just trying to get the cheapest calories you can, right? And so a bag of Doritos is cheaper than that, boneless chicken breast, right? And so you're getting whatever calories you can so that you can make it stretch. So I want to pause now. I think Peter had a question. And so I think, let's stop
Yeah,
there,
well,
do some Q&A.
I'm curious, the one of the plus minus ones was around gender, and what is the data saying around gender and food insecurity?
Yeah, it's getting better, thankful, but it is, females are more likely. I think we know a lot of stuff there, and there's several factors in that. There's the pay, right? There's the pay disparity, and then ladies are much more responsible than us men, frankly. And so what we've learned is that if a woman gets money, she'll invest it in her home, into her kids, and men are more likely to, I don't know, buy a motorcycle or something dumb. And so there's a lot of those social factors, but it all ends up to women are statistically more likely to suffer from food insecurity.
Wow. Other questions or reactions or curiosities? How just a couple more data points. So how many total schools is Every Meal serving now?
Yeah, it's really complicated right now. There have been so many social workers that there's a lot of schools that are on like their fourth social worker. And so we've had 588 reach out to us. We haven't been able to ramp up that many this year because there's we're just having communications really difficult with a lot of schools. And so their principal reach out, but it's just really hard to find that administrator. But that's what we're scaled up for, which we're thankful to be able to do. Our 3-year vision is to be in every Minnesota school that wants us and to have a multi-state model. We're in just a little bit in Hudson, Wisconsin. So technically we have a multi-state model.
Yeah, interesting. And and has the name change from Sheridan Story, which was rooted in your origin story of the school you started the program
Mhm.
started within, but now called Every Meal. Has that ushered with it greater clarity, greater
Yeah, it's
vision?
been really
Like,
good.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't had a lot of pushback from folks who are like, I hate that name. I think most folks are like, oh, it makes sense. And then it just fits our mission so much more clearly, is that every child should have every meal that they need to succeed, right? And so it's a bit more descriptive, and it's been a good shift for us, and it's been exciting, kind of living into it. We haven't gotten a lot of bad, you always lose a little bit of name recognition, and thankfully, we didn't lose any momentum at all. It helped us gain a little momentum. But yeah,
Tell
there's
me,
some folks that are like, who are you? Yeah.
tell me again where your funding is from.
Yeah. And so the biggest model is churches. And so, like I said, we have the benefits of the economies of scale. And so we can get bulk food prices, and then that relationship with the school is owned one-to-one, or sometimes a couple of churches will team up to join the school. That's pretty common as well. And so as part of that relationship is the volunteering aspect, the Friday volunteering, and then some funding. It's $250 per kid per year. And that stayed flat over
Okay.
from 2020 to 2021, which we're pretty proud of, because you've been to grocery store and seen the rise in food costs. But I think I mentioned in 2019, we became a direct importer, which was just providential. And so we've been able to largely be unaffected by a lot of the supply chain issues that are hitting a lot of folks. And so our costs, we've been able to just through logistical, gymnastics, keep our costs flat.
Okay.
There's often a gap, because, if the church is like, there's some schools and we deliver $20,000 worth of food, right? And so a church can't do that. And so that gap is subsidized by individual donors. And so we're all just community funded.
Okay.
So Susan asked the question I was going to ask, but I have a sort of related one, Brian. So when you were talking about that funding gap, and you said it's by individual donors, are there corporate sponsors or like bigger companies that donate to help fund this?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So it's not all churches, it's some companies. And then if there's a company or a foundation that would give us funding, frankly, we push them toward traditional sponsorship, because it's that engagement, it's that Friday volunteers, the good stuff. So Cari Gelle, for example, is one of our sponsors, and Cari Gelle sponsors 4 schools, and it's by division. So I think it's like Cari Gelle Sweeteners and Cari Gelle Oil Seed, and so all these little divisions at Cari Gelle, and their employees also volunteer at those schools. And so we like to do that as much, because that's the good stuff, right? That engagement, that working in the school with kids. And but we do also have some companies or so that'll do like a matching, like we'll do a matching for like Gift to the Next Day or that sort of thing. And so that's where we live in the kind of traditional area of philanthropy in Minnesota, right? The Give to the Max and Year in Giving and that sort of thing. And then where we're unique is that, kind of one church to a school relationship.
And then I have another question, which is you talk about kind of the logistics and all the work that your organization does. How many people are on your team, or how big is your company as an entity? Yeah.
No, I love that question. 35. So right around 35. And so some of our new team members, though, I think are really exciting, that I'd love to just give you a bullet point on what they do. We just got a procurement officer from Cari Gelle. And so his job is to look around the world for the best prices. And frankly, we don't want to get the cheapest food. And so we like to get nutritious, delicious, and relevant. And so we'll taste test. And so our procurement manager, Martine, He's brilliant, again, from Cari Gelle, so just deep experience. And so we'll do taste testing, and we're like, oh, these 5 cans of tuna, ugh, this one tastes real bad. Even if it's cheapest, we won't buy it, right? Because we want to get stuff that families will eat, and that's or it's like, this has no nutritional value. We won't get it. And then there's certain bags. We have 5 bag types: East Asia, East Africa, Latino, highly mobile in general. And so the East Africa, for example, a lot of it has no pork products because of religious dietary preferences. And because we're a direct importer, we can get a lot of brands from that region. And the folks who get our bags, they're like, this is amazing, because we can't get this, they can't buy it here. And so they're like, that kind of reminds us of home, and just some brand stuff. And so that procurement manager, someone that we worked with. The next person we hired what we call a program connector. And there are a lot of backpack programs, and there's a lot of, food is a complicated situation. And we really try to be a good neighbor to food shelves and that sort of thing. And so this connection person, that's something that's in our heart. We just want better cooperation among all kind of the food related nonprofits. And so this person's job is just to build friendships and relationships, and how can we collaborate and work together to do better, right? And to reach more kids. So that's another job. And then our program staff is what we're most proud of. And the program staff, they work in individual schools to make sure that the program runs well. And so to make sure that we'll have a social worker that's like, we only have 5 kids signed up. We're like, well, did you just hand out the sign up forms? And so then our program person goes in there just to try to make sure that it goes well, to get participation up. And that's expensive, to pay for all these people, but more kids get fed that way. And so we have 6 members on our program team, and they're just wonderful. And so they support the guidance counselors. And that's been critical when there's been a lot of just staffing turnover in public schools.
Well,
And then you have folks like me that I talk to churches. And so, but that adds up to about 35. So between logistics and program is our biggest number of people.
Rick, why don't you give us our last question, and then we're gonna.
Okay, well, yeah, I wanted to come in. We had an administrative screw up today or last week. Who's responsible for inventory control and
Program.
what?
Program. Yeah.
Program. What do you mean?
So the program person will connect. And so if there's ever a problem with inventory, like on Friday, you're like, gosh, we needed 3 green boxes and we only got 2, then that program person, and we'll get it fixed as soon as we can.
Okay, how and does that fixing come through the school? Because and then I had another related question, because thinking of the Muslim pork thing, or not just Muslims, but we ran out of green lunches on Friday,
yeah,
which is the go-to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And so we happen to have an excess of the purple ones. And I don't know what that was, but we gave that where we couldn't give a green one, we gave a purple one. I'm just thinking a green one probably would be okay, but which one is the one without pork?
Right, purple. That's
something that I think you've got a great instruction video that explains a lot of questions. I think it would be good if that video covered which ethnicity each of them are, because we really don't get that. But anyway, that's enough, I guess. But
yeah, so have your volunteer coordinator. The great thing is our warehouse is close. Like, we're in Roseville, so we'll run over. Like, we'll hand deliver a box of green. So we'll put it in the car. And
okay, well, they didn't seem to know that in the office. I went back to the church office and told them what the issue was. And I said, I don't think we want to not give them anything.
Yeah.
And right now, our location has excess purple boxes.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. But
I tell you what, Rick, I don't know who the program coordinator is off the top of my head of so many schools. So Peter, can we do an email?
Yeah, yeah,
We'll get
we'll
we'll
get
get
it
it fixed.
connected. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll get it
absolutely.
fixed.
So,
Yeah.
so and we don't cover every week at Central Park. So Roseville Lutheran
Oh, that's right.
also co-sponsors Central Park with us, and so some coordinating of conversation between them and us is probably helpful as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but Brian, thank you so
Yeah,
much
absolutely.
for helping tell the story tonight, and it's a really important way for our community of faith to live out our callings, to work with you in partnership to make sure these kids and families are taken care of in this way. Food is such a central dynamic, and it really is a powerful ministry that we are thrilled that we can continue to support. I want to turn things over to Cari, who is here to share some information with us about the upcoming election season, which will include a question about the school levy. So, Cari, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Pastor Peter. And this has just been a really inspiring evening so far. And hearing about how Prince of Peace supports Central Park Elementary School and Every Meal, and really supporting students. So I'm going to be talking about supporting students also. And I would just share for Brian's benefit or anybody else here, when you start talking about logistics and operations, that's my world now too. Professionally in my work life outside of volunteering in church, I've worked in retail and wholesale and manufacturing and distribution, and I'm currently operations and quality assurance manager for a company that sells goods to major retailers. And so, yeah, moving things around and getting the things that people need and want where they need to be has been part of my career for a while. But as it relates to the operating levy, talking about operations, so it takes funds, it takes funding to support the operations of schools. And that's what's coming up on this election, November 2nd of this year. And so what will be happening is Roseville Area School District residents will vote whether to renew and to increase local funding for the district, for our schools. And our current operating levy that is in place will expire if it's not renewed. And that would result in a loss of about $8 million per year to the Roseville Area School District. And even with the levy renewed, the funds, if it just stays at the level that it is, those funds would be insufficient to stop additional cuts. They would not be enough to maintain our existing programs and student support. So this has been determined by the school board, and plenty of finance folks have looked at this, but they've determined an increase is needed. The district hasn't asked the community for any increase in operating levy since 2006. And some of us may remember that the voters approved a building bond 4 years ago in 2017, and I volunteered on that one too. But there's kind of an acronym or alliteration that helped me understand it. And bonds are for building, meaning those funds can be used to support the building facilities. And so you've probably seen a lot of construction around the Roseville area over the last few years. And our buildings had not had any upgrades for 20 years, and many of those buildings were 50 years old. So those were desperately needed. But anyway, bonds are for building and levies are for learning, is what I learned. So the levy is about all the operational costs to help students learn, like teacher salaries and other expenditures for technology and programming and curriculum and that sort of thing. So if voters approve both questions to renew and to increase, that would allow the district to lower class sizes to invest in student mental health and social emotional needs, to maintain the high level of quality academic programs that we have. It will allow them to expand career pathways to better prepare students for various careers after they graduate. And in general, it will help maintain the district's financial stability. So you might ask, well, what happens if we don't approve it and we don't increase it? That would result in significant financial repercussions. There would have to be reductions in educational and curricular programming. There would be staff cuts. It would increase class sizes, so more students per teacher and more students in a classroom. There would be fewer supports for students. And in general, the district's financial health would deteriorate, which would kind of create more risk of not having contingency funds for emergencies, kind of like how we talk about food insecurity. Those families that don't have a savings account and are living paycheck to paycheck, that's pretty tough. For a district to not have its financial reserves or be able to deal with unexpected, the water heater goes out, or related to operating, it wouldn't necessarily be a building issue, but some unexpected expense, we wouldn't have those contingency funds. So that's kind of some of the information I wanted to share with you. And certainly want to engage in some questions. I wish I would have thought of a cool game to play like we had with Brian. But I don't think I have one. I think all of us can kind of remember being in school and maybe we had a favorite teacher, or maybe we had a time in school that was really tough and somebody went to bat for us, whether that was our teacher or maybe the career counselor when we were in high school, or maybe it was the drama coach, or maybe it was somebody in a extracurricular club that just kind of helped us figure out how to get through that tough time. And so we just kind of really, for me personally, I really want to make sure all those supports are there for our students. I haven't been fortunate enough to help volunteer with the Every Meal yet, but I'm looking forward to giving that a try. Maybe the last thing that I'll share before I open it up to questions is why am I talking with you about this? Like, why is this important to me? And why is it important to me to bring to my church community? So for me, I was just mentioning this to a parent today, talking after the 10 o'clock or 10:30 service. And when I went to church, it was like we drove to church, we listened, we read, we prayed, we sang, we came home. And that was kind of like all that our family's spiritual life was. You know, Sunday to Sunday, not much happened in between. And as I've grown in my spiritual connection, I just try to live my life in community. And I really love the Prince of Peace's kind of motto of living God's love in the world. And so I just look for ways to live God's love in the world and in his creation and with his children and his people. And so kind of like how we support by providing food to Central Park students, I figure, well, what else do our students need? How could I live God's love? Well, the district needs funding to teach them. So I'm like, that's as simple as the equation is for me. I can live God's love by volunteering and seeing that they have the financial resources to be able to learn the way we hope they all can learn. So that's my why. So yeah, questions, comments.
Cari, do you know how much the current levy is, and then if it gets renewed? The other question was how much the raise is. So what percentage of my property taxes are going currently to the levy, and if it gets renewed, what percentage increase would I see?
Yes, that's a great question. And I'm going to quote a little bit of information for you from this flyer that folks may have already seen in the mail. And our students, our community, our future. Yep. And if it's in a stack of mail, go look for it later this evening. And it's like fine print, I will tell you. So you will need your reading glasses. But there's a chart on this, whoops, here we go. A chart on this right-hand side that kind of answers Peter's question. And we all kind of have different market values of our homes. So it lists market value from 100,000 on up to $1 million or more. I'm somewhere in that range, let's say. So, and we often talk about kind of the average median home. And the average median home in Roseville, or the median value, is 280,000. And for that level of a home, if it's just renewed, it stays at whatever we all have been paying. If we agree and vote in the increase, that would amount to $22 a month additionally. So it's a little over 200 a year for any of us who are at that median home range. So yeah, very good question. And if you're below that median, you're below. If you're above it, you're above it.
We have to vote for both of those?
Yes, actually, there will be a spot on the ballot where there are two questions. Question one will be, and I'll read this, shall the renewal of the referendum levy authorization proposed by the school board of the district be approved? That's question one. And then question two is, if school district ballot question one is approved, shall the increase in the levy authorization proposed by the school board be approved? So yeah, there's two questions.
And I suppose if somebody just votes for the second one, thinking, well, that automatically covers the first one, that's not true.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, you have to fill in both boxes or fill in both bubbles.
Do these levies expire? Is that why it has to be renewed?
Yes.
I mean,
yep.
We don't think education is decreasing in cost, do we? That we say, well, we'll support it for 5 years and then it ends. I mean, why do we do things that end like that? I suppose that's illegal.
Versus doing it indefinitely.
Yeah.
It's a great question. And that I don't know the answer to. But I do know kind of why is there a gap, if that's a question. Try to show another little visual here. If you can see those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So there's the gray line and then there's the orange line. And the distance in between the two of them is basically the gap between inflation and state funding. And so basically, because there are multiple sources of multiple financial resources for the districts. It's not just all of us homeowners or residents. The state provides funding as well, but the state's contribution has not kept pace with inflation. And that may partially answer your question, Rick, about, things change over time. So they typically will set the levy for 10 years and then it comes up for renewal and reconsideration. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
This might be not relevant for today, but I mean, Roseville can afford this, obviously. But what about poor districts that can't afford this? They don't, they go to their people and their people are like, we played the game tonight.
Right.
They're not some of the people in the district, they're most of the people. It's just frustrating to me that all education isn't funded equally. And if you fund it all equally, it has to come from the federal government. And that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Rick, I share your frustration, and it is an odd system that we have in this country, or that this is how we fund. educating our citizenry. Hmm.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's partially, we can thank the, what is it? I can't say the word now. The, where the Senate can just shut things down by saying, we're gonna read the form.
Filibuster.
Filibuster. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Cari, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for bringing that information to us for this evening, and lots more information available. Thank you for pointing out that mailing. I remember I have it sitting over
Yep.
there on my counter, and I've been wanting to sit down and go through it. So,
Wonderful. And could I just put in a plug for the district website too, Peter? Because if by chance this is too much, or if it's too little and you want more, it's just Google Roseville Area School District 623. Get to the district. Right on the district homepage, you will see a little box that looks like this. And you can click on that, and there's tons of information there. And there's a lot of FAQs that might do deeper dive. So, yep, thank you.
well, I think back to the way this day started with our conversation with Principal Burkus at Central Park, who did a wonderful job of again bringing us into her school, helping us understand the very diverse student body that they serve, and how those students just have a great opportunity before them, except there are lots of challenges in this work, that continue to compromise the ability for those educators to deliver on the lofty goals that they set to empower these young people to take charge of their learning, to really advance themselves. And the families that are connected to those students have huge dreams and expectations and hopes for those children as they grow. And so something we can do in our neighborhood is to continue to find ways to support those educators, to support the students and the families that are behind them. And so we're grateful, Brian and Cari, for your presence tonight and helping deepen this conversation for all of us. This has been a real gift to have this time with each of you, and grateful for the rest of you for showing up tonight and being in conversation with us. We'll be making these videos available on our website, and so talk it up to other people. Say, hey, you should tune in and watch that thing we had about the school or every meal or whatever. So with that, I'm going to give you thanks for being with us tonight, and send you on your way. Blessings to you all.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Blessings, everyone. Have a good evening.